Thank you all for joining us today for Leadership Log, which is the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center's podcast on topics of interest to the LCMC community. And today we've got a group of executive officers to talk to us about what is it like, what is life like as an executive officer in the United States Air Force and in the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center in particular. So we're joined by four outstanding young officers, and we're going to go around and meet each one of them and allow them to introduce themselves. So Captain Goolsby, you can start.
Hi, my name is Captain Allison Goolsby. I am the exec for the Presidential and Executive Airlift Directorate, serving as the executive officer for General Ryan Britton. I started as the exec in July of 2019, so I've done almost a year as an exec. I've been in the Air Force for 8 years. I am an acquisitions officer, so a 63A, but I've also served as an Air Force ROTC instructor at the University of Oklahoma. That was actually my previous assignment, so I was hired in to be an exec out of my ROTC assignment. So there's wonderful things that can happen in the exec world and making things happen, and we can get into that a little later on. But I commissioned out of ROTC at Oregon State, was an acquisitions officer in Colorado, met my husband, which he'll be talking a little bit later on. And we've just had a fun career. We've got 2 boys, so we're raising teenagers, and we've both been serving as execs at the same time. So it's definitely possible.
Okay, and speaking of your husband, Captain Paul Goolsby then.
Hey, thank you. So I'm Captain Paul Goolsby, like my wife mentioned, and I've been the executive officer for General John Newberry, who's for about a year now. Again, we started at the same time. He's been the executive officer for, or the program executive officer for Tanker Directorate for another couple of days, and then he's taken over the Bomber Directorate, which because there's a gap, and when my replacement's here, I'll be kind of the temporary Bomber executive officer for a month or so before I move on to my next job. I've been in the Air Force for 16 years now. I joined in July of 2001, started off in aircraft maintenance, worked on the B-1 bomber and the KC-135 as a jet engine mechanic before I did the SOAR program. That's the Scholarships for Outstanding Airmen to ROTC. So I have a 3-year break in service where I attended Louisiana Tech University, got my undergrad, and then they made me acquisitions officer, sent me to Peterson. Again, that's where I met my wife, Allison, there. After our tour at Peterson, did a career broadening as a recruiting flight commander in Oklahoma. And then, just like my wife, got hired directly into the executive officer role here at Wright Pat. And yeah, 2 sons, one turns 14 in 2 weeks and the other's 15 and a half. So it's a lot of fun.
All right. We'll make our way to Captain Camille Thompson.
Hi, I'm Camille Thompson. I'm currently serving as the executive officer for Mr. Stephen Wirt, and that's AFLCMC HB PEO Digital. So I'm also coming up on my year. I started last July, so I'll be rotating out soon. But prior to that, I graduated Air Force Academy in 2014. And then from there, I was also a maintenance officer. So I was at a spec ops base at Hobart Field, Florida. So there I circled a couple ANUs and worked on the AC-130s, MC-130s, CB-22s, and also got to deploy to Afghanistan with the AC-130s and the spec ops units, which was an amazing experience. And then after that, I switched to acquisitions, which was a culture shock. But I've adjusted well. So I've been in acquisitions for 3 years now. And then I transferred to Mr. Wirt as the executive officer. But after that, I plan to go to Kessel Run and work in a software company. So I've been in the Air Force for about 6 years now coming up. So it's been a wild ride, but a great career, and I've loved every single assignment that I've had so far.
Sounds great. Good. All right. Kessel Run, that sounds interesting too.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. All right. And we'll go on to Captain Chelsea Stout.
Hey, how are y'all doing? So Chelsea Stout, I've been in the Air Force for about years now. Full acquisitions all the way. No trips out to any of the career fields like these guys. I've been doing pretty much the whole time. Air launched cruise missile B2. Got to go spend the last couple of years with B-21 program, so really excited. Really enjoyed that. Then I got plucked out of my coach basement up into the exec. It was a very interesting and a good time and a good shot getting at all that. Married, my husband's a contractor. He's acting as well. We have a 2-year-old. So I always like to say that mix of interesting hobbies I would have ever had anyway. 2-year-old. But it's been a pretty good time, and I'm happy to be here to talk to you.
Okay, your audio cut out just a little bit there. So how many years have you been in the Air Force?
8.
8 years. Okay. All right. So we'll go around to. So we were kind of talking about this, and I go a few years back. I'd met somebody, and they told me that being an executive officer was like penance for young officers. Okay. Which I don't think is exactly right, because penance is normally something that you do to atone for a sin, and I can't imagine that any of you guys have done anything so that would have warranted this sort of penance. So my thinking is that it's either a rite of passage, okay. So as you advance in your career, it's just kind of a milestone that you need to do on a leadership track, or it's just a giant mentoring session that you do for like 2 years at a time. So I don't know. Am I right with that? Is it a mentoring session? Is it a rite of passage? Who wants to take that first?
Hey, this is Paul. I'll start off. Actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. I think it's kind of both. It's something that, as a young officer, if you can become a executive officer for, especially like a 1-star general or something, that in itself is getting selected for that is an accomplishment. And that's when it's on your records like that, people see that, hey, a GO signed off on me, and because you go through, they review your records, you go through an interview, and then they just have to hire you, and then you have to survive, more or less. But you're also right in saying that it's just a year-long mentoring session, and that's just, you name it. One of the things I was thinking about, what have I learned? Well, I could come up with 100 things I've learned, but so yeah, it's a continuous mentorship. But yeah, it's funny that you mentioned it. It's kind of both for me.
Okay.
So I also agree with Paul. It's both. In regards to mentoring, I remember for my interview, Mr. Word basically asked, like, why do you want to be an exec? And I referred to one of my podcasts, and I think it was a Tim Ferriss podcast, and he said there's nothing better than being a fly on the wall, listening to 2 senior level leaders talk and the discussions they have, and then being able to watch the decisions your leader makes, how he makes them, and how he can just be so direct and have conviction in what he's doing, which I think is important. And it's also important for you to see that level of decision making as well. So like I've learned tons of things, but it's just great being able to be a fly on the wall, not really having to partake, but be fully in listening mode the entire time.
Anybody else? Okay, well then, so let's talk about things that you have learned, all right? So I know one of the things that kind of always amazes me about senior leaders is the amount of time that they work, okay? I used to think that, you get to be the boss so that you don't have to work as much. But when you look at senior leaders and their calendars, it's like chock full of stuff nonstop all day long. So it would have seemed like, time management is a huge challenge for them. So what have you learned in regards to just time management as far as ways that you can arrange yourself throughout the day to take care of all the things that you need?
I can take this one.
Okay.
For this past year, it's looking at, well, what's the highest priority items? What are the things that need to happen first? Who are the most important people that General Britain or any of the PEOs need to talk to? So if it's somebody higher than them, obviously that needs to take priority over somebody maybe at a division level. If it's somebody coming from SAP AQ, or if it's somebody coming for us from the White House military office, those folks are going to take precedence. So it's really prioritizing the people, the meetings, and then making sure there is time in between to really kind of digest what just happened. And then you kind of figure out, well, if we're going to talk to this person, you better schedule it for an hour, not just a half hour. So you start to get a feel for what are these meetings actually going to be, and you can better prioritize and prepare your boss so that his schedule isn't so crazy. But you start to learn, you kind of pick up on those little, tips and tricks as you go through it. It's not something that you might know in the beginning, especially if it's a brand new PEO with a brand new exec. You both are trying to learn each other, and you're trying to learn who each other are and what's most important. So it's a learning process as you go along, but it can be pretty crazy. But you start to know what needs to take the head honcho.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'll pile onto that as well. It's that prioritizing. I think it becomes pretty clear what help you can be as an exec, right? Like, oh, that is why oh my flood of input that is coming in from all the you really put yourself in their shoes. So, yeah, they're not going to have time for this. How can I put it in a way that really product for them to process and doing that? And I think that's what's so impressive. I think working for senior leaders is the amount of they can just understand. And that's certainly a skill and what I think makes it pretty successful. But yeah, it's not just taking the time for the other smaller things that may not be too, but you need to make it for, and that's what you can help with as an executive. Why I need to clear things away. Hey, you need to take time personal. No, I need to make time to stay late for as the people, right? So things like that, and I can fit in there and help back with that.
So keeping in a time kind of theme, I've known some leaders that were like super detailed in their calendars. They scheduled time that they were going to write emails to people, or they scheduled time that they were going to do PT, or they scheduled time for lunch, or so that every little thing that they were going to do throughout the day was managed on their calendar so that they would make sure that they would actually do it. So have the people you worked for been that detailed, or have they been a little more fluid with their calendars? Or
I guess you can go ahead.
Go ahead, Camille. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so my boss is pretty self-sufficient. The only block that he has scheduled is his lunch. He basically leaves it up to me and the assistant to run his schedule. He's basically like, I'll do whatever you guys tell me to do, and I trust you to put whatever's the highest priority on there at the top and know how much time to schedule and allocate. But outside of that, he just leaves it up to us to what we think that he needs to get done that day.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for my boss, similar. He doesn't block off lunch. He doesn't block off anything. The whole day is open game. But as myself and the executive assistant that manage his calendar, we make sure to take care of him as well, because I think that's a big part of it. Is the senior leaders, they'll go. They have been, but I make sure, okay, if he's got to travel, let's make sure he has plenty of time for that. If meetings are in the middle of the day, let me make sure I give him time to eat either early or late. But it is kind of dependent on the style and of that person you're working for, and they do work long hours, and they fit in an inordinate amount of meetings and activities every single day.
Mhm.
And no, it's very impressive to sit there and watch.
So, so let me ask, has there been a moment when you felt overwhelmed in the position? You know, maybe there were a lot of taskings, or there was just a lot that you had to get done. Maybe something had fallen through the cracks or needed like last minute attention. And so did you get to that point where you felt like, I'm going to let the boss down? And then what did you do to get through that situation? And I'll throw that out. Who wants to jump up and take that one?
I'll go if everyone else is thinking.
Okay.
Very quickly, this right here, it's my notepad.
Okay.
The entire book is filled with my to-do list. Some days you add way more things than you cross off.
Mm-hmm.
But it helps me keep track of things and prioritize things so nothing does fall through the cracks. And me personally, when chaos happens, I make a list and just start knocking off most important things to do. And I just start going down the list.
And you just have to be willing to know that there's going to be some days where you have to work the long hours. So your spouse, or if you have kids, like they have to understand that it's a temporary job. Usually it's a year, maybe a little bit more than a year, and you just have to make it work. And if you have situations to where you do have maybe another spouse that's also working, or you've got to pick up your kids, then you just really have to be honest with your boss. And sometimes you've just got to be honest with your spouse then, that if something needs to be done, if something needs to get done, you got to just stay and do it. Mm-hmm. And so having that open line of communication and knowing that this is temporary, it's not always going to be like this. You're not always going to have to be working until 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. Hopefully.
I guess I'll speak 100% honestly. When I first got in the role, I was like, what the heck is this? I felt a little confused and overwhelmed at first, but then I quickly realized that we had a great team around us, and it's not all up to you to figure everything out. You have those team members for a purpose, and it's okay to ask for help and reach out when things do begin to pile up. So I was able to quickly figure out like who to ask when I did have a question, and then how to go about those things as well. So I will say, like, there has been moments where I've been overwhelmed, but I luckily haven't dropped the ball because I've had a great team around me to help prevent that from happening as well.
So one of the questions I think that was on the email was, like, how did you get into the job? Was it something that was recommended for you, that somebody told you to interview for, or was it put out as an announcement? So how did you get the exec job?
You should go first.
I can go first. So
I know where this is going. It's a good thing when this is not going live.
This could go live.
Guys, on.
So sometimes the exec jobs are posted through emails, and so an email was posted looking for an exec for the Presidential Executive Airlift Directorate, and a former boss of mine, while I was an instructor at Oklahoma University, he forwarded the announcement to me and Paul and said, hey, I know you guys are trying to get to Wright-Patterson. Here's an opportunity if you want to apply for an exec job. And I said, I don't want to apply. That doesn't sound like something interesting for me. And he was like, I already have my package ready to go. Like, I'm applying for this. You should too, just so we can get to Wright-Patterson. So I applied, and we both interviewed, and somebody got the job.
It's all about fit. Yeah. What you realize is even just to be considered is really good, but if it's whoever the boss or whoever that person, like, they just jive with the most. And honestly, I think it worked out great.
Yeah, I think I would second what Allison said. He said, "Hey, would you like to be the exec? You know, there's an opening up at Fighter Bomber." And I was like, "That's okay. I'm all right. I'm having a good time down here. I love my job. I'm loving it. I'm good to go." And I did. My boss said, "You know what? It's time for you. It is the right fit for you. It is the right, like, this is what you need, whether you know it or not. You know, eat your vegetables, do your chores, right? This is your time to do that." So I interviewed. I got to know the team. Got to know the job, and you know, sometimes you just got to take the advice that you're given. And yep, it's probably my time to do it. I never thought I'd be an exec. It didn't particularly interest me, but I've enjoyed it. It was the right call. It was the right fit for me, and definitely with my boss, it was a personality fit. There were some other great candidates, and it came down to personality. It came down to we were going to be able to jive and work together. So it's been a good call. But yeah, I think I joked with it that I don't know. I'm not sure about people that go hunting for exec jobs. You know, I don't know, guys. With my joke in the interview, and I think that I think it stuck with them.
So what advice would you guys have for someone if they talk to you, if they asked you about applying to be an exec? Would you recommend it? What would you tell them to do or how to prepare?
Sorry, you're
Who
cutting
wants to
out.
take that? Captain Thompson?
Yeah, you're cutting out the
Oh, I'm sorry.
gist of it. So my feedback to that, just be willing to work, be willing to put in those hours, and be willing to sometimes put your boss's needs over your own. So you just have to be open to working long hours and just be open to like learning new things and stuff. But that's like my only advice is just be willing to work, because it's a lot.
Yeah, I was kind of talking about this a minute ago with when Allison was talking about how she got into her job. Is if being an exec is something that you desire to do, or if someone recommends you to do it, then I mean, definitely go for it. But you have to understand, as you know, you're only going to get picked if the person who's hiring you, you know, the boss, if you jive with their personality, and they might have to hire someone that is will help offset them, or just go straight along with them. So it's really on what they want. You can be like the best out there, but if you are not what they are looking for, you know, on a personality or work habits or just any type of that, then it may not work out. But they probably won't hire you if they know that. But that's why you get hired, and just to be considered. You're already, you know, doing a great job. But so I would say if someone wants to do this job and they've applied or put their name in the hat a few times and didn't get it, maybe it was for the best. You know, maybe your personality wouldn't go with the bosses, and maybe it's a good thing that you didn't get hired. And if you want to do it, just keep throwing your name in the hat, and you'll find somebody that syncs with you, and you'll go from there.
Yeah, I think I'd add to that also, when you go in, you know, something you're considering interviewing you, but you're interviewing them as well. Some of the best advice I got was, you know, you're gonna have to work with them. What do they expect out of you? I'd like to even expect, you know, I mean, what do you see, and what that want to travel with them, if you want to sit in meetings, that leader is willing to let you be that fly on the wall if that's the experience you want. And just but take that opportunity. They'll respect you for it. Questions, but especially if you're on the fence, and I think it'll help you grab that jive and that personality fit.
Okay. All right. So let me ask, then, we talked about kind of the thing that you have learned about managing time. I want to talk about what you've learned from these leaders about the way that they interact with subordinates. Okay, so sometimes you see the way that some leaders Well, I worked for a general one time that no matter who he was talking to, he had the ability to make that person feel like they were the most important person in the world, you know, and he would give like his full attention to them. And it was just the way he engaged and how charismatic he was. It was just great, you know. And so you could tell that was something that he wanted to ensure that when he was meeting with somebody that they understood that they had his attention. And other leaders I've worked with were really great at giving negative feedback to people. So, you know, sometimes people come in, there's something wrong with the program. They need to be told that they've gone the wrong direction. You know, how do you do that without necessarily killing somebody in the process of doing it? So, so what have you guys picked up? You've worked with these are successful leaders that have all gotten to these positions. What have you picked up in terms of how they address other people?
So I can start with this one. So my boss has a very lighthearted, charismatic attitude, and he doesn't like to sit in his office that often. So he definitely gets around, and he definitely jokes around a lot with people, because that's his way of showing that he's there for people, and he wants people to feel comfortable in their workplace. He doesn't see work as just you come, you sit down, and you sit on your computer. He wants people to interact. It was actually very hard during these last couple of months during this whole thing, because even though General Britton and we were still in the office, it was hard for him because there was nobody around. And that's how he knows, like, his program is doing well with just talking to people face to face. So that was tough. And he does travel a lot because he likes to get to his other divisions, and he likes to get out to see the contractors and see all the folks that are working on these different programs, because he wants to recognize people for what they do, to make them feel special, to joke with them, to just know that everything that they do has a special place in this program. So that's how he's done this whole thing. I think it's really his whole life. That's just how the type of the type of leader he is.
Anybody else?
Yeah, if the other two don't have anything, I'll pipe in, because what Allison and I experienced was our bosses were the complete opposites of each other, which made for great conversation. Both are extremely effective at what they do, but, you know, yes, General Newberry traveled and saw his people and things, but he was not the type that would just go out and you know, joke around with everyone. But that doesn't mean that he wasn't effective in taking care of his people. Like I said, you don't have to have a certain one particular personality to be successful as a leader. You really have to own who you are and who, you know, and just perfect that. There were other ways that in the meetings, his tone, his questions, when he communicated with others, it was a sincere conversation where his calm demeanor really, you know, let everybody, it's going to be okay. Yes, everyone's freaking out, but we're going to diagnose the problem. We're going to figure this out. So yeah, two completely different personalities, both very effective in what they do. And it was very interesting, and I think fortunate for us to go through this experience at the same time. And you know, what would go down in her directorate, and if we had a similar thing, the response may be completely different, but at the end result may have been the same. So it's very interesting to see how multiple personalities and styles can both be successful.
Yeah, I think it's an important thing that you said, that, a good leader knows themselves, and they know how to capitalize on what they do well and to mitigate the things that they don't do as well. Captain Thompson, what's been your experience?
So I'll say mine is similar to Paul's. So Mr. Wirt, he's pretty quiet, but once he opens up and you get to know him and he starts talking, he's hilarious. But a lot of people don't know that because he does come off as very quiet. But he is probably one of the most efficient people that I've met. I still don't know how he gets everything done. I will send him something and he'll send it back right away. And he rarely has a backlog because I think he's extremely efficient with his time. So he doesn't spend a lot of time out of the office speaking to people, but he does make time in a schedule to do walkarounds to make sure he interacts with people, to make sure he's there. But there's also a time and place for that. But overall, like, getting to know him has been great, and he's really funny, but a lot of people don't see that side of him as well. But I also appreciate how he's even keel with everybody, and at meetings, like, things can be chaotic and crazy, but he still has like the same calm demeanor no matter if he's giving positive feedback, negative feedback. It's just even keel. So I appreciate that about him as well.
Captain Stout?
Yeah, I think I've got something in the middle, probably. Paul Collins is a self-introvert, engineering brain. So definitely appreciates that to kind of digest. And we've talked a lot about how home and this COVID situation has been really types, and I think for productive, but in a ton of levity, loves to laugh, loves to come talk out with preaches a lot about family, having a good workplace, have a good time, spend a lot of time. Really one of his mantras. And while he is an introvert, he does a lot to out of that shell and talk to a lot of people and have those good relationships with the industry. All of those important, but kind of like you said, with your personality type. I think he's pretty good at that. He realizes when he's got an extrovert that's the side and come that pretty well.
So I want to, let's kind of work towards a close here. So looking back, do you think that this experience has helped you to prepare to become an executive yourself as a leader in a large organization? Is that your career goal, to go on and become an executive or a senior leader? And if so, do you think that this position has really kind of helped you mature in that way?
So I can start. Something that we haven't really discussed, but I think it's really important to point out, is the fact that this position as the execs for directorates has really shown from a career standpoint what needs to happen with promotion boards and all the whole process, IDE, SDE, kind of seeing a little bit behind the scenes and how all of that works, and some things that maybe need to be on our records as we're going through, and how do we get to that next level if we want to be considered for those positions, considered to be a material leader, to line us up to be a senior material leader or PEO one day. We got that behind the curtain look at what that takes and those processes. And really it helps us as individuals prepare our own records that we can set ourselves up for success and position ourselves to be ready to be considered, later on for other opportunities. So I think that has been a huge benefit for this exec job, not just seeing the senior leaders and how they work, but just seeing all the behind the scenes stuff that really, that's what gets you to where you need to be.
Right.
Yeah, I'll second that. That's when people ask me, kind of huge learning curve. I mean, that is, if you are out there and don't want to be an exec, but you have military personnel questions, go for it. All the details and what has to happen. Just kind of understanding, people always ask, figure out, and this comes after this. You need somebody who's kind of been in. I think Allison, that was a huge learning experience.
And also piggyback on that, I think one of the most valuable things that I also have learned is what the senior leaders are looking at when they look in your records. So you're able to specifically know, like, you need this on your record, you need that. He doesn't look at this, but he cares about that. He's having that kind of background knowledge of what he's looking at to make sure that's in your folder when you do decide to go forward to be considered for special opportunities. So I think that's invaluable, that I probably wouldn't have got that experience if I hadn't been an executive officer.
Yeah, and I'll close by putting a slightly different spin on it. And there's two big things that stick out to me in addition to what they've already said, which I completely agree with. And that's gaining perspective and confidence in this position. Perspective as in, at the directorate level, across the entire portfolio, you've been able to see what's going on. And if you were just a captain running a project in one of the divisions, I've talked to many of them. I would say most don't have an idea about what goes on even at the top of the division, much less the top of the directorate. And then also perspective into above the directorate, when you get into SAF-AQ and LCMC and the MAGCOMs, you just aren't exposed to that. And so it's invaluable. And when you can connect the dots all the way up from small projects to the very big picture at the very top, then it helps you understand and motivate you to get your work done and accomplished even better. And second part of that is confidence. As the exec, I think it is one of my jobs to try to look ahead and help out Joe Newberry as much as possible, whether that be type up things in advance for him, prepare documents in advance for him, reviewing all the military personnel types of things. And when you go from at the very beginning, while you're learning each other's style, you're going to go through, you'll hand something to him, it'll come back completely different. But over time, when you start handing him things or your boss things, whatever they may be, and they just come back with concur, send it, go for it, like, that gives you the confidence, not only that have you learned that style and personality of what he likes, but you're talking about you've learned what thought process and the decision-making process of a general officer, and you now understand what questions they're going to ask, what information they need to make decisions, and you can do that all by yourself. And now, because you're kind of doing things, behind the scenes for them, you just get that concurrence. And when you get it right over and over and over again, you're like, wow, I think I do. I think I have learned kind of what it takes, at least from this individual's perspective, what we have to get accomplished on a day in and day out basis. And it's huge.
Yeah, bingo. Mill personnel hole, that's just one of the more eye-opening. Yeah, the corporate Air Force acquisition officer, specifically for all of us, and for PEO, the corporate process, what makes them work, gets in the way of all of that perspective, and then exactly down to that captain, down to whoever you are in that program office and working, it's a puzzle, kind of steer the ship, right? It's a big effort position is, and I think, that perspective, right, the messaging, like, how things work and how messaging, outstanding perspective. Certainly the other side of this.
All right. Is there anything else that we haven't discussed that you think would be important for our listeners to hear?
I do. I have one final thought, and we kind of touched around this a little bit, but your experience as an exec will be 100% reliant upon the boss you have. You've heard great stories, you've heard horror stories, and I would just say, like Chelsea mentioned earlier, when you go in for that interview and they're interviewing you, you need to be thinking, I'm interviewing them as well, because you're signing up for something that you're going to have to live with and your family's going to have to endure for the next year or so. and your experience will definitely depend on the type of boss you have. So I feel like I've been extremely, lucky and blessed. And I feel like when the senior leader, regardless of rank, treats you with a lot of respect as an officer, but more importantly as a person, it is so much easier to work harder for them than it would be if they didn't respect you more as a person,
Yep.
Yeah. I think
All
I'd
right.
add out to the execs, ask them questions, right? Wherever you are, I feel like plenty of time being a customer support. So if you have a process, who to talk to, we're at least well all day long. So I would say don't ever director your division, whoever it is, reach out, learn about being exec.
All right. Well, hey, again, I really appreciate you all sitting down and joining us today, discussing these topics. I think this is great stuff to share with your peers and our colleagues, and even civilians, to help understand a little bit more what you guys are going through. So again, I really appreciate your time today, and thanks, and have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.